So earlier this year, we were shown Platinum Games' newest project that was going to be going to the Switch, and that was Astral Chain. And if you go back and look at a lot of reactions for this game in particular, when it was being shown, people were kind of initially like, what's this? This looks good. Is this Platinum? This is probably Platinum. It's Platinum. Astral Chain. It was a lot of people just being really, really interested in what the game was without really knowing a ton about it at the time. And then we gradually learned more and more and more throughout the year. And here we are now where it has finally come out. And because the holiday season is looking just packed with games right now, we're about to go in September. It's going to get really crazy with releases, and then October and of course November. But I have to think that Astral Chain is a game that should be at the top of your list to pick up. It's not easy to make an original IP anymore in the gaming landscape, where it's a lot of sequels, and occasionally you'll get that one really cool game that comes out that's brand new. This is one of those games. I think at this point it's an absolute must-buy, especially if you primarily play on the Switch. Now, this is a game, of course, that is developed by Platinum Games, and it's being published by Nintendo with some kind of collaboration and input during development as well. It's directed by Takahisa Tora, who was the lead game designer for Nier, and then we also have supervisor Hideki Kamiya, who, of course, we know for Devil May Cry and Bayonetta. With Bayonetta 3, we assume getting some sort of update eventually. This is going to be, I think, holding a lot of people until then, hopefully. But this is so different from a lot of Platinum games recently that I'm pretty excited to talk about this just because it feels so different. So to get started in the game, you play as an officer as part of a special elite police force known as Neuron, and in the beginning you get to pick between either a male character or a female character. They are twins, and at that point you kind of go off and you do police stuff. Seriously, this is a game that is not all about the combat, and that's the most striking thing about this game. Normally we hear Platinum games and we go, oh, flashy combat, crazy over-the-top finishing moves, all this stuff, explosions. Not necessarily. This one is slower paced. And I'm not just talking about the frame rate, I'm talking about just the game in general. Half of it isn't even really about the fighting. Half of it is about, and I'm not kidding, investigating crime scenes and kind of retracing steps to figure things out. Yeah, seriously, you'll spend half of the time doing things other than just blowing stuff up and fighting with flashy combat. And you know what? I kind of like that. It is an interesting change for Platinum Games to go in. That's an interesting direction. When you start up the game, they do throw you into combat initially, and it's fairly simplified, right? You have ZR, and that will hit things with your baton. But then, eventually, you get what's called a Legion. And a Legion are entities that will help you fight against the big enemy in this game, which are the Chimera. And they come over from another dimension. Now, occasionally you will travel to the astral plane and fight them there, but they have pretty much crossed over into our world and are ripping civilians back into theirs and essentially threatening humanity. So what do? We pretty much take them over and use them to fight themselves. That's pretty much what we're doing. The Legion have been captured by us, and we are now using them to fight against the Chimera. And it works. I think the story is pretty good. It jumps off pretty quick. I mean, seriously, the first level, they just drop you right on a motorbike, and you're barreling down a tunnel, you know, doing all kinds of flashy moves and everything, and then you jump off, you capture your Legion, and then you kind of make it back to the police station, and from there you start up files. Each part of the game is broken up into a file, and then it's all kind of sectioned off that way, so you do kind of understand how far through the game you are, as I would say at this point I'm a little more than halfway done. I also noticed that the game starts off kind of like a Metroid Prime, or even, I guess, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Think of how those games will show you all of the cool stuff that you can have eventually, and then they take it all away from you. Without spoiling too much of the story, that is what happens. They show you all of the cool legions and all the cool things they can do. They have some neat cutscenes set up for them where they're just wrecking Chimera through their different abilities. Like, for example, one is basically uses a sword, a really big sword and everything. Another one punches stuff. Another one shoots arrows and projectiles. And then they're all taken away. And you are left as Assault Officer who can control a Legion, which is pretty much key to our ability to survive against the Chimera. And as you work through, you get the other Legion back. And it's a pretty cool way to kind of keep the story kind of rolling along, the momentum going. So there's not as much downtime despite it being a bit slower. And I did really look forward to getting different legions as I went along because they have different abilities. For example, the Sword Legion is able to slash through different things. So think of like Cut from like the original Pokemon games, and it'll open up different areas or get you past certain obstacles in different fights. So you'll have that one. You have one that can shoot arrows across and will open up different paths. So they have abilities outside of combat as well that help you solve puzzles. But let's talk about the combat, because this is something you're going to be doing for half of the time outside of the investigations. And combat, at first, you're going to be playing it, and until you get to a certain point, the combat's pretty basic. There's one button, ZR, and you use that mostly to hit things with your different weapons, and you'll get 3 different weapons as you go along. You have a quick baton, you have this big heavy club sword thing, and then you have dual pistols. And as you go through, you start to realize that you'll need to use them for different enemies. Like you might need a faster way to hit a certain enemy, or you might need to break through some armor, so you shift over to, your heavy. Or maybe you're fighting flying enemies and you have to shoot them. The one thing I will say about these, I wish it was faster to switch between them and you could kind of combo them together. It seems like you have to be very thoughtful about switching between them, and like, just as an example, hitting them up in the air with the heavy and then switching to your dual pistols and then switching back again to like your baton, just kind of roll through them. That's something I would have liked to have seen a bit more, and so far I haven't really seen easy ways to kind of string together combos. But when you bring in your Legion, that's when things start getting insane. I mean, seriously, you want to get to like 2 or 3 hours in to really see the combat in like its full glory, because it is crazy. The Legion is chained to you with a chain, an Astral Chain is the idea, right? And when your Legion is called out, so you have the ability to call them out or bring them back in and kind of take them out of combat, you have that control. And there is like a meter that will fill up and kind of wind down, depending on what's happening, whether your Legion's taking damage or just in general being out. And it's your job to kind of monitor that and decide if they need to go away for a few seconds or come back out. But when they are out, you can do all kinds of stuff. The chain itself is controllable to where your Legion, you can hold ZL, at which point your Legion can be controlled with the right stick. So you can run them one way, you go the other, and then you can kind of wrap the chain around an enemy and it binds them for a certain time, giving you some free shots. Now, stronger enemies will just break out of it, but it's a pretty cool way to kind of get the upper hand. If you see an enemy dashing towards you, you can essentially make a clothesline by straightening it out completely and then launching them backwards, and that also stuns them. So there are some neat ways to have the chain interact with things around you. You can also wind the chain around certain obstacles, and you can jump to your Legion. Your Legion will basically pull you towards them, and you can use that to get around obstacles, or you can use that in battle. So if you're fighting an enemy, your Legion, which is computer controlled, is on the other side. You can then press, I believe, ZR, and you'll jump towards them, and then you'll kind of drop kick. And it's a way to keep combos going and makes everything just looks so cool. I think the one thing that will turn some people off, and I get it, is that the frame rate is 30. It's 30 frames per second. That's just what they went with. I think they wanted to go with a bit more of a visual clarity to it, because I feel like if they had to get 60 frames, it would be fairly blurry because the resolution would be pretty low. As it stands now, from what I can tell when I'm playing it, I do notice the resolution at times moving and changing, so it might drop kind of drastically during combat, but because I'm focusing on things other than just the resolution, obviously, I'm trying to make sure I have my combination going and everything. I'm making sure my Legion is controlled correctly and in the right spot. There's a lot of managing going on during combat. I don't notice it every time, and I don't even really think about it too much right now. I would say The frame rate is going to be the thing that's going to bug most people, especially if you're used to things like Bayonetta or Bayonetta 2, where we're rolling at 60, and then you come back to something like Astral Chain, and it's halved. That will mess with things like your input and everything, and that's something I can understand. Maybe in the far future we get Astral Chain 2, and they look at that and say, you know what, let's kick this thing to 60, because, you know, the Switch 2 or something. I'm way ahead of myself, I know, but just putting it out there, you never know what could happen with Astral Chain. Maybe it becomes a very popular franchise and they work around that. But for now, 30 frames per second, and the art style, I think, masks the lower resolution. The art style is fantastic, by the way. I mean, it's just so cool. The world and everything looks great. The character models are awesome. Like, I just love the way this game looks in general. It really pops off the screen. It's not incorporating like HDR or 4K or anything, but just with what they went with here with Platinum Games, it has a ton of style, and I really like the way it looks. The music is amazing. I mean, seriously, the music is used in so many different ways to set the mood for different situations, whether it's supposed to be really tense or there's supposed to be a big buildup and a big climax, something happening. It was written and produced by Satoshi Igarashi, and they had previously worked on Bayonetta 2, and what was really interesting to me about this, reading through interviews and different things, Nintendo apparently had the idea to bring in 2 vocalists for the music, and the idea was actually to signify the 2 main characters, the twins. But I mean, the music is just, it's so good. Now, in order to keep you going in the game, we do need some way to have character progression, whether it's through RPG methods, right, where you have, like, for example, in this game, you have a skill tree that you'll go through and you'll get different abilities. You get essentially the experience from defeating enemies. You then take that and you build up each one of your legions. Not to spoil too much, but you will have several legions to build up, and they'll have different abilities based around what they're good at, and you'll have different things like the attack, defense, and then some really cool things you can do mid-battle. Again, the combat really starts to evolve even further with these different abilities, because you'll get even different moves, and you will kind of equip them to different legions, and you can switch between the legions in the middle of battle. It gets crazy. So if you're not feeling the combat right now, but you've only played like 2 hours, keep going, because by the end of the game, I have a feeling things are going to be nuts. It's going to be all over the place. You also upgrade your weapons, so your different weapons like your baton, your heavy weapon, and your pistols will start to also increase based on currency you use in shops to then build them up. And then you also get basically a score at the end of each file, and that will build up your overall ranking for your character. And you'll get like different unlockables like costumes, color palettes, and stuff. But it'll also increase your health. So there are several avenues to upgrade your character, your legion, and your weapons. Now, the investigation, I think, is an interesting path. I'm okay with it. I think it does need a little bit of work, the investigations themselves, because the overall feel of the game really does slow down when you start doing them, and there are times where you're really not 100% sure on what to do. Now, you have something called the Iris, which is basically detective vision, for example, from Arkham, from like Arkham Asylum, and it kind of reminds me of that. When I first started using it, I was like, oh, this is similar to like the detective mode from Arkham Asylum, where you hit a button and things kind of go almost like an X-ray. Everything's kind of highlighted and you can see everything, and it'll also point out certain points of interest, right? So you go around, you ask a lot of people, and you are trying to piece the crime scene together. I do enjoy it, but I do think at times it's a little odd, like go find this graffiti artist, just as an example. I ended up being off in like this weird corner, and I feel like some of them they're just strung out just a little too long, and maybe that's helping with the length of the game in general, but I feel like at times there are these gaps where it just feels like it's taking longer than it should. But again, I appreciate the different direction they're going in, and maybe towards the end of the game I'll have some cases that are really exciting. But I have to say, so far I've really been enjoying my time with Astral Chain. I'm gonna keep playing it, finish it up, probably over the weekend into Monday or Tuesday. Should have it all finished up. I think Evan actually already finished it up. Oh, yeah, he's already finished it. And we'll talk about it a bit more on the podcast tonight, so tune in for that, or check it out if you want more thoughts on the game. But I would say, at least so far, my impressions are very, very good, a little more than halfway through the game. And I think for most Switch owners, this is a must-buy. Would I buy a Switch just for this game? That's tough. If you're a Platinum Games fan, yeah, probably. Yeah. I think you would like the game if you're a fan of Platinum Games, but there's also a lot of games that you probably already have a Switch for now anyway. Most likely you were sold on something like Zelda, just for example, or Mario Odyssey or Mario Kart. And if that is the case and you're just looking for a new game to play, pick up Astral Chain. I think so far it's been worth the $60 I spent on it, and I have a feeling I'll get quite a bit of time out of this one without spoiling too much. It looks like you're going to be wanting to play through several of the files all over again with different legions. Thanks guys for watching. Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it. It helped you out, maybe deciding if you wanted to get Astral Chain, dislike it if not, and get subscribed as we go along here into September. Things are going to get pretty hectic. There's going to be a lot of stuff happening, so subscribe here to stay up to date. I'll see you guys next time.